welcome to this edition of our special series, World at War. I'm your host, Priyanka Sharma. A major conflict seems to be brewing between Armenia and Azerbaijan, the two erstwhile Soviet republics. On the 13th of September, minutes after midnight, Azerbaijani forces launched a major artillery offensive and deployed drones in many sections of Armenian territory. This, according to Armenia's defense ministry. In the ensuing border clashes, more than 100 Armenian and 50 Azeri troops were killed, as claimed by the respective nations. Theirs has been a history of violence, bloodshed and ethnic strife. Interestingly, Europe has chosen to maintain a relative silence about the skirmish in order to not disturb its plans of getting gas from the Caspian Sea from Azerbaijan. Our first report gets you all the details.
The border between Armenia and Azerbaijan is on the boil again. In this video released by the Armenian Defense Ministry, Yerevan claimed that the Azerbaijani troops advanced towards the border. This sparked one of the deadliest clashes that have been witnessed since the 45-day war in the autumn of 2020 between the two countries. According to reports, more than 150 soldiers have been killed in this skirmish. The Armenian Prime Minister, while addressing the Armenian legislators, acknowledged the casualties suffered and blamed the Azerbaijani armed forces for the latest flare-up.
As of now, we have 49 service personnel killed in action, confirmed by the Ministry of Defense. But I have to admit as well that this figure is regrettably not the final one. Azerbaijan is trying to claim that these actions came as a response to some kind of provocations by the Armenian side, but we can definitely state that this information is absolutely false and has nothing to do with reality.
Baku, on the other hand, pinned the blame on Yerevan for this latest round of hostilities.
In general, over the past month, there have been provocations of the Armenian armed forces in the directions of Lachin, Gadabay, Dashkasan and Kalbajar regions of the state border, and cases of shelling of the positions of the Azerbaijan army in the territory of these regions using various caliber weapons are of intensive and systematic nature. At the same time, it was observed that Armenia concentrated offensive weapons, heavy artillery and military personnel along the borders of Azerbaijan. All these facts once again demonstrate that Armenia is preparing for a large-scale military provocation.
The bone of contention for this bitter animosity between the two former Soviet republics is the Enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh. This enclave is entirely inside Azerbaijan, but is populated predominantly by ethnic Armenians. What has complicated the situation in this hotbed of conflict is the involvement of various foreign powers. A Russia-brokered peace deal brought an end to the 6-week war in 2020, which resulted in over 6,500 casualties. Russia has stationed about 2,000 peacekeeping forces in the Azeri-Armenian conflict zone as guarantor to the security agreement. But Russia's status as a peacekeeper is increasingly on slippery turf, considering the recent setbacks it has suffered in Ukraine. Keeping a close eye on these developments is America, increasingly more involved in its proxy war against Russia in Ukraine.
Well, always concerns, because whether Russia tries in some fashion to stir the pot to create a distraction from Ukraine is something that we're always concerned about.
Azerbaijan, meanwhile, has Turkey in its corner, with which it shares deep cultural and political links. Baku had made significant territorial gains in the 2020 war, reclaiming land it had lost to ethnic Armenians in an earlier war over Nagorno-Karabakh in 1994. Whether the recent escalation of the decades-old conflict is a coercive bargaining tactic on the part of Azerbaijan, or whether it will lead to the Syrianization of the enclave, with different security zones controlled by different actors, only time will tell. With calls for a debate on the conflict in the UN Security Council gaining clamour, Russia would do well to avert another theatre of war after the quagmire of Ukraine it finds itself in presently.
A remote valley in the north of Kabul is historically renowned for being the centre of resistance. First against the Soviets in the 1980s and later against the Taliban. Panjshir, which literally translates as 5 lions, has been a flashpoint in the recent turbulent history of Afghanistan. The Taliban, in its latest offensive this week, claims to have killed more than 40 fighters of the rebel forces in the Panjshir Valley. So a year after the Taliban stormed to power in Kabul, how strong is the resistance against this hardline Islamist group? Our next report gets you more details.
The last pocket of resistance against the Taliban rule in Afghanistan seems to be losing ground rapidly. On Tuesday, the 13th of September, the Taliban claimed to have killed 40 rebels of the National Resistance Front, or NRF, including 4 commanders in the northern province of Panjshir. In addition to this, the Taliban also claimed to have captured over 100 rebels. The NRF, though, has countered these claims by saying that these figures are grossly exaggerated. The opposition group has been embroiled in a bitter tough war with the Afghan Taliban since they took over Kabul last August. Fighting a valiant battle, the NRF had retreated to the Panjshir Valley, a traditional stronghold of theirs. The spirited fight is helmed by Ahmad Massoud, London-educated and trained at the famous Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. A fighting spirit seems to run in the family, as he is the son of revered fighter Ahmad Shah Massoud. Nicknamed the Lion of Panjshir, he was a Mujahideen fighter who thwarted both the Red Army and the Taliban forces before his assassination by the Al-Qaeda in 2001, just 2 days before the 9/11 attacks. His portraits can still be seen throughout Panjshir province, perhaps a reminder of the place he has in the hearts of people as a symbol of resistance. The NRF claims to have conducted operations in the valley and clashing with the Taliban fighters frequently. The Taliban, in a bid to reaffirm its control over the entire country, has refuted these claims and has denied widespread fighting. Whatever might be the influence the NRF wields over Panjshir Valley today, this latest setback is bound to make the fight a lot tougher for Ahmad Massoud and his fighters.
The Caribbean nation of Haiti is on the verge of a complete breakdown. Gangs have gained an upper hand in their fight with the police, and daily protests against soaring inflation, acute shortage of fuel and insecurity have plagued the island nation for weeks. Take a look.
Roads have been blocked, businesses shut, and gangsters roam free. This current situation in Haiti is rapidly descending into a state of utter chaos and lawlessness. Hundreds of Haitians trooped onto the streets of Port-au-Prince and other cities, protesting against rampant crime, galloping inflation, and acute fuel shortages. The protesters are demanding that Prime Minister Ariel Henry must step down.
The reason we are on the street is to demand the departure of Prime Minister Ariel Henry with no conditions. We say no to the excessive cost of living, no to insecurity, and no to the artificial fuel shortages.
Adding to the woes of the protesters, the government has announced that the price of gas will be more than doubled.
We need to adjust the price of gas. We want gas to be available at all times in stations all over the country. We are working on it in a short time, and we have to fuel regularly.
The newly announced price hike will see the price of a gallon of gas go from $2 to $4.7. The move is likely to force some Haitians to leave the country, as many are dependent on gas not merely for transportation, but also for electricity and cooking. In addition to this, Haiti is grappling with an inflation rate of 30% and an escalation in gang-related violence. Just this week, 2 Haitian journalists were brutally shot dead and their bodies set on fire. They were reporting on the rising gang violence in Port-au-Prince's neighborhoods. Gangs have increasingly grown even more powerful since the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse on the 7th of July in 2021. The Caribbean nation is in for some very challenging times ahead.
The United States has again tested its nuclear-capable Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile. According to the US military, it did this to validate and verify the US nuclear weapons system's effectiveness and safety. But nuclear deterrence depends not just on having ICBMs that are capable of carrying nuclear payloads, and for this, a nation must have missiles that are harder to shoot down by anti-missile systems. So how does the United States fare on this front? Our next report explores.
Item 128, under closure door, open. Item 129.
This is a missile test which the United States carries out a total of 4 times every year. On the 7th of September, sharp at 1:13 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, an unarmed but nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missile, the Minuteman III, blasted off from the Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. It traveled a distance of 4,200 miles over the Pacific before hitting its target at the Kwajalein Atoll near the Marshall Islands. It was the second such test within a month. This was a routine test, and according to reports, the United States so far has carried out this test a total of 300 times. The Minuteman III represents the land leg of the US nuclear triad. Along with the Trident II submarine-launched ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons that are carried out by long-range strategic bombers like the B-52 and B-2 that complete the United States nuclear triad. The Minuteman III has been in service since 1970. It weighs a hefty 36 tons, has a range of 10,000 kilometers. It can carry 3 payloads and can detonate on impact or in mid-air. But recent hypersonic missile tests by Russia and China have raised some serious questions on what nuclear deterrence actually means. Intercontinental ballistic missiles are launched on large rockets. Their trajectory is predictable. They can be detected early in their flight, and this allows for more time for an ICBM to be tracked and intercepted by anti-missile systems. But hypersonic missiles are different. They fly in a trajectory that is lower down to the Earth. It is possible to maneuver them throughout their flight, which makes it much harder to track them in their flight. The Satan II that was test-fired by Russia on the 20th of April is a hypersonic missile with an estimated range of 18,000 kilometers. It can fly at a speed of 6 times the speed of sound. And if fired by Russia, it has the potential to devastate any European capital in a span of less than 200 seconds. And what is more, the Satan II, according to Russian claims, can be maneuvered in mid-flight, making it that much harder to detect and intercept.
The new system has the highest tactical and technical characteristics and is capable of overcoming all modern anti-missile defense systems. It has no parallels in the world and will not have them for a long time. This truly unique weapon will strengthen the combat potential of our armed forces, reliably ensure the security of Russia from external threats, and make those who, in the heat of aggressive rhetoric, try to threaten our country, think twice.
The American Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin initially dismissed the use of hypersonic missiles as a nuclear overkill and not a game changer. But increasingly, military analysts now point out that hypersonic missiles could potentially change the balance of power in nuclear deterrence. China has the mid-range hypersonic boost glide vehicle, the Dongfeng 17, that it displayed at the Beijing military parade in October 2019. Retired General John Hyten, who served as the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, highlighted that in the last 5 years, China had carried out hundreds of hypersonic missile tests. while the United States, with the biggest military budget in the world, is still years away from deploying a hypersonic missile of its own. Although in July earlier this year, the United States did conduct a successful test of a Raytheon Technologies Corp air-breathing hypersonic weapon, technological superiority often trumps big military budgets and large-scale military deployments. The Minuteman III is expected to be replaced by 2029. But until the United States can match Russia and China's hypersonic deployment, there is a chink in America's formidable military might.
In the last 7 years, Burkina Faso in the Sahel region of Africa has been in the grip of deadly Islamist violence. In the latest incident, a blast at a supply convoy has resulted in the deaths of more than 35 people, and dozens of others, including many children, have been injured. The military that staged the coup in January earlier this year claims that it has intensified its operations against the Islamist insurgents. But despite that, there have been a string of terror attacks that have claimed hundreds of lives just this year and have forced thousands of other people to flee from their homes. My question is, why has Burkina Faso failed in stamping out the deadly Islamist violence? Our next report gets you some details.
This is a scene that has now become all too familiar. Government officials visiting hospitals to offer compensation and hope to the wounded.
We found that the medical teams have been working hard since the tragedy occurred, and in collaboration with the teams of the Ministry of Humanitarian Action. I would like to salute the bravery, serenity and responsiveness with which these teams took charge of the wounded. I would therefore like to encourage them to continue along this path.
The attack took place on the night of the 7th of September. An improvised explosive device was used to target a supply convoy that was transiting from Djibo to Burzanga. Groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State have fanned out across the northern and eastern part of Burkina Faso. They've struck both government and civilian positions at will. The military junta that toppled the government in January 2022 and promised to crush the terror outfits has so far failed to deliver.
I ask our nation to trust the defense and security forces and the government and not to give in to the psychosis that armed terrorist groups are trying to develop to destabilize our country. The signs of the strategic shift are already perceptible. We remain confident in our strengths and in our ability to defeat this peril.
According to estimates, just 60% of Burkina Faso's territory is directly administered by the government, while groups affiliated to the Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State and other non-state militia control the other 40%. 86 people were killed in the month of June when armed gangs of men went from house to house in the village of Setenga, picking off individuals they could lay their hands on. Those who managed to survive decided to flee from their village despite assurances from the security establishment.
It's so serious. It's very serious. We can't even explain it. I can't even express myself. Everyone is scared. In Setenga, there is no one left. They stripped the house. They searched everything. There are no children or adults. They killed everyone. They don't ask if you're a child or an adult. Even if you close the house, they did everything to open the door and kill the children and the men.
Even army barracks have come under attack. In the month of May, 5 soldiers of Burkina Faso were killed in a jihadist attack. In the last 7 years, an estimated 2 million people have fled the country.
To conclude our show today, we bring you a story of human spirit and resilience, even in the face of daunting challenges and seemingly insurmountable odds. A sushi bar in Kramatorsk, Ukraine, just 20 kilometers from the front lines, has decided to stay open. Our next report gets you their story.
Working in this little sushi restaurant in eastern Ukraine's Kramatorsk is Igor Besuk, a sushi chef. one who has perfected the art of making the perfect rice and seaweed rolls. Despite the rumbling overhead and the air raid sirens, and the constant threat of shelling, this sushi bar was not spared the wrath of Russian shelling. In the earlier days, this quaint bar was hit hard by Russian strikes. But Igor was back 20 minutes later to take stock and begin cleaning up.
Everything started to fall. The windows started to shatter and fall down. We went quickly to the basement, stayed there for around 20 minutes, and then came out. We had a quick look at what happened. We continued our work and removed the broken glass.
Even now, Igor and his companions put on their aprons and continue operations per usual. Though finding supplies in the early days was a Herculean task, they now have found a system that works for them. It is one that also involves putting on loud music to drown out the loud rumblings outside. They continue to serve the few people left behind in this war-battered city that once had a population of 150,000 people. And they have no intentions of leaving. It also doesn't help that most restaurants shut shop in the early days.
Now it's the work that is needed by everyone. Since the beginning of the war, most food industry establishments have closed. So I felt that it's necessary to work. Who else if not us? That's what I thought. That's why I didn't leave. I don't plan to leave and I will continue to work.
As for Igor, war is war, but dinner has to be on time.
Well, that's all that we could pack in today's edition of World at War. Thanks for tuning in. This is Priyanka Sharma signing off. Thanks for watching World at War.